Good evening, everyone. We're going to start, so please have a seat if you're not seated yet, especially the one in the back. You can come closer, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of the Consulate General of France and of the ASHK Society, my name is Benjamin Cabois. I'm the Counsel for Culture in the French Consulate, and I'm here with Lise Maillard-Salin, my colleague, and we will be your MCs tonight. First of all, welcome to this fifth edition in Hong Kong of the Night of Ideas. After 5 years, the Consulate General of France and ASHK Society are teaming up once again to offer you an eventful event, an evening about heritage. And with our partners, I would like also to thank for the kind participation, Street Sign Hong Kong, who are here, and the support of the Alliance Française. Thank you, and I will pass on to Lise.
So our event tonight will include diverse activities, so let me briefly guide you through it. We will have the pleasure to welcome French and Hong Kong specialists in 2 engaging roundtables to explore the edges of the notion of heritage. The first roundtable, Rebuild the Notion, What is Heritage?, will take place from 6 to 7 p.m., while our second roundtable, Revive the Notion, Can Heritage Take Hold of the Streets?, is scheduled from 8 to 9. During the break, you will be able to enjoy various activities that we will detail later on. But before jumping right into it, to inaugurate this event, I shall invite Ms. Alice Mong, Executive Director of the Asia Society Hong Kong Center, to join us to the stage for her welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Lise, and thank you, Benjamin. Welcome to Asia Society Hong Kong Center. I'm so happy to be able to be hosting live event again, and thank you. And I wanted to, on behalf of Asia Society Hong Kong, I want to thank the Consul General of France in Hong Kong and Macau, and especially thank our speaker today, Mr. Marc Lamy, Deputy Consul General of France in Hong Kong and Macau, supported by the Institut Français and Street Sign Hong Kong. And of course, our moderator today, Douglas So, Chairman of the Antiquities Advisory Board. And this is our 10th anniversary of Asia Society Hong Kong in this center. In fact, I think Douglas was here. It was February of 2012 when we opened our door to this site, and formerly used by the British military to house ammunitions, and then we've been able to turn it into this fabulous program space featuring programming events and working closely with the various consulate around to present programs, exhibitions, and Night of Ideas is one of them. And I'm so glad that after, I think it got started here at Asia Society Hong Kong in 2018, and we really welcome its return. We look forward to more collaboration with the French Consulate on programming, projects, and exhibition. And we've signed an MOU on this, so every year we look forward to more collaboration. Last year, Asia Society opened its second center in Europe, and it was open in Paris, joining our Zurich Center. And we really welcome our Paris Center as our 14th Asia Society Center and part of the Asia Society Global Family. And we've already been doing a lot of joint program, online program with them. Many of the founders of the Asia Society France really has direct links with here in this region. So we know there are going to be more collaborations with our colleagues over there. As you may know, we were founded in Hong Kong in 1990 to really emphasize the globalness, the global connectivity of this dynamic city. With the opening of our center in 2012, we're now able to connect even more with the local community, and by presenting dynamic programming like tonight, including films, lectures, and in 2013, we had the honor of welcoming the French Foreign Minister, Laurent Fabius, to speak in this hall. And we have done some groundbreaking exhibitions, and tonight's Night of Idea, I know it was postponed from January, but it's so great to see all of you here. Tonight I'm going to highlight heritage, culture, and connectivity during this challenging time. I'm sure you all know this past three years we have been through a lot as a city. We've been through protests, conflict, not to mention we're still in the midst of an unprecedented global pandemic, but we are still here. And our finances are probably in the worst position since I became executive director 10 years ago, because our rental income is almost zero. But you know, and also this year compared to last year, we're 10 staff short from last year, and so we're still here. So we are still here to provide content, to put it in needed context, and to connect the community, whether local or global. Part of tonight's program is also to visit our current exhibition, Recovery, Resilience, and Resurgence, at the Chantal Miller Gallery. When Mrs. Carrie Lam was here a few weeks ago for a private tour of the exhibition, I told her that two of my favorite words these days are gratitude and resilience. After seeing the exhibition, hopefully you'll understand why I chose those two words. Tonight, my gratitude to all of you for being here with us tonight, and resilience, because this city embodies that spirit. And so I want to thank you all and have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to welcoming you back often at Asia Society Hong Kong. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. I will now invite to the stage the Deputy Consul General of France in Hong Kong and Macau, Mr. Marc Lamy. Marc, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, dear friends, good evening, bonsoir. As Deputy General Consul of France in Hong Kong, it's a pleasure to welcome you and to be with you tonight to launch this 5th edition of the Night of Ideas, La Nuit des Idées, here in Hong Kong. First of all, I would like to warmly thank our partner, the Asia Society Hong Kong Center and its Executive Director, Ms. Alice Mong, for making this whole event possible. Many thanks also to Kevin Mack, Ken Fung from Street Sign Hong Kong for their outstanding participation, and the Alliance Française for their support. A special word of thanks to Mr. Douglas So, our moderator tonight. He's going to be very busy, for his exceptional commitment to the project, as well as our speakers, Professor Cecilia Chu, Professor Richard Klein, Dr. Chloe Lai, Mr. Stanley Wong, and Ms. Marisa Yu. The Night of Ideas is a global event launched in Paris in 2016 with the support of Institut Français to spread the French culture of debate around the world. The Night of Ideas encourages public discussion from individuals of various backgrounds to debate on current social issues. This year, the worldwide theme was Build Together, which evokes the past as well as the future. We could not have hoped for a better place to conduct this event at the former Explosives Magazine Heritage Site in the heart of Admiralty. As the Asia Society Hong Kong Center celebrates the 10th anniversary of a successful reuse of this historical building, it made sense to choose to explore the notion of heritage, as one must learn from its past to shape its future. Both France and Hong Kong have a deep bond with heritage. The emotion during the Notre-Dame de Paris fire in 2019 and the exceptional mobilization afterwards showed how much French people cared about their heritage and how that love was shared around the world, including in Hong Kong. Heritage is a complex notion that is not carved in stone. A skeleton, a lamppost, a pyramid of ladders. Those words are from the famous French writers Verlaine, Blois, and Maupassant, who used to describe the Eiffel Tower when it was first built. Today, who could imagine Paris without it? In the words of the French Heritage Mission head, le patrimoine est notre héritage commun et le trésor que nous devons transmettre, which means heritage is our common legacy and the treasure we must pass on. I'm looking forward to hearing the interesting insights from our speakers on this topic, as I am sure you all are. I will conclude these opening remarks by thanking you all for coming today, and thank you for your attention. Merci. Bonne soirée.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Consul General. So without further ado, let us begin with our first roundtable dedicated to the notion of heritage. It is my great pleasure to call to the stage our moderator tonight, Mr. Douglas So. Mr. So is a prominent figure of heritage conservation here in Hong Kong. He is the chairman of the Antiquities Advisory Board, senior member of the Advisory Committee on Built Heritage, as well as the founder of F11 Photo Museum. Please, Douglas, join me to the stage. Participating to our first roundtable, I would also like to invite Professor Cecilia Chu and Dr. Chloe Lai to come to the stage, while Professor Richard Klein is joining us live from France. Douglas, I will now leave you to it.
Good evening. Do I have to? Okay. Good evening. Bonsoir. I'd like to give my very warm welcome to all of you to the Night of Ideas. It's a privilege to be at the Asia Society. And I would like to, first of all, thank the French Consulate of Hong Kong and Macau for organizing this event. And I also like to thank Asia Society and Alice for hosting us in this beautiful heritage venue. I cannot think of a better venue to have our Night of Ideas with the topic of heritage being discussed. So I look forward to a very, I would say, rich evening of discussions and learning from our distinguished speakers, whom I'm going to introduce in a minute. And also at the same time, looking forward to your strong and active participation and sharing your ideas with us. Before I start, I'd like to share a few observations about the topic of heritage. I do not intend to give any definitions. You all have your own definitions, and there are really no right or wrong definition of heritage. But a few observations about the topic that we're going to spend a few hours tonight. Firstly, I think for me, heritage itself is a very loaded topic. I think most of you would agree that with heritage, we're not just talking about old architecture or things of the past. There is so much emotions and personal experience involved in heritage. And this is primarily the reason why we have such a strong reaction of the public. Often they care so much whenever there are rumors or plans about redevelopment in our city affecting these old buildings. Secondly, I think that heritage is an evolving topic. I think many of you, like myself, would probably agree that our concepts of heritage actually change over time. Just now, Deputy Consul General Mr. Lemmy talked about the Eiffel Tower and how maybe Parisians see the Eiffel Tower back then and now. The other example that I could think of in Paris is about the pyramid at the Louvre, I think, which was completed in 1988. And for those of you who know this project, you know that at the very beginning, it was very controversial. There were lots of debate about the building. But I think if you ask most people, Parisians or otherwise, people will tell you that, oh, of course, this is an icon of Paris now, and it's very much part of the Louvre, even though we're talking about a building which is about 40 years old. So our concepts about heritage is changing. In Hong Kong as well, 25 years ago, we in this city started to have this regulatory regime about grading of our heritage buildings. And 25 years, there are so many incidents, people remember the Star Ferry, we'll talk about all the other buildings, the Houghton Garden, and many others. And I think we have come a long way since the 25 years. And this year, if you have been following the news, for the first time, we are going to declare a modern building from 1962, which you all know, the City Hall, to be one of the declared monuments, which is going to be protected by the law. And then we are going to be declaring also the first mosque, the Jamia Mosque in the mid-levels, and also declaring for the first time the Tong Lau in Lui Shen Chun as a declared monument to be protected. So these are all achievements, and also I think our concepts about the heritage itself. It's changing in a sense that let's keep an open mind. Tonight, our speakers will be taking us through the case studies in Hong Kong, in Paris, and I think to the UK as well, where we'll be learning from the different projects and about new ideas concerning heritage. Thirdly, I have to say that in my experience, heritage is also a very controversial subject. The reason why it's controversial is because I think we care about this subject. We attach a lot of emotions to it. And a lot of times with heritage, we're talking about tens, if not hundreds or thousands of stakeholders involved in these projects? And how do you build a consensus amongst them and agree a way forward? That is always a challenge. And then I think this is also one of the reasons I think why heritage conservation and revitalization is so interesting, because we hear so many suggestions from the public and from the stakeholders, and eventually we have to come to a solution. You will also notice that the theme of tonight is called the Night of Ideas, and it is not called the Night of Answers, because with heritage conservations, I think the purpose of tonight is we are not going to be aiming at providing answers to a lot of the questions raised. We aim to have a fruitful discussions, a free flow of ideas, and hopefully innovative and also intriguing ones from our speakers and also from all of you. And I hope that at the end of the evening, you will go home with a whole bag of brilliant ideas. And then I think a lot of these great ideas, I hope that they may sound absurd when you first hear them. But then a lot of these ideas will have to be refined. And I think tonight we will learn from different case studies. And I'm sure there will be something that we will benefit from them in Hong Kong. If some of these ideas at the end of the evening will make you lose some sleep, I think we are going to have a very successful evening. Yes. So at this stage, let me introduce our panel of distinguished speakers to you. So on my left, very happy to have Professor Cecilia Chu. Cecilia is an associate professor in the Division of Landscape Architecture at the University of Hong Kong. She was trained as an urban historian with a PhD in architecture from the University of California, Berkeley. Cecilia's work focuses on the social and cultural processes that shape the forms and meanings of built environments and their impacts on local communities. Amongst her many professional capacities, Cecilia is the co-founder and current president of Hong Kong chapter of DOCOMOMO. And I would especially like to introduce to you, hot off the press, a new book from Cecilia. It's called Building Colonial Hong Kong. So I haven't read it, obviously. I only seen this like 10 minutes ago. But feel free, I think during the break, to have a chat with Cecilia. I'm sure Cecilia, at her presentation or later on, can tell us more about her new book, which by the title itself looks so attractive and exciting. And joining us by Zoom, hello, Professor. Bonjour. We have Professor Richard Klein. Professor Klein has been an architect since 1985. He has a doctorate degree in art history and qualified for the direction of researches. Richard is a professor at the National Superior School of Architecture and Landscape at the University of Lille. He is also the president of the National Council of Teachers, Researchers of Schools of Architecture, as well as the president of DOCOMOMO France since 2015, amongst his many achievements. And last but not least, I have on my far left, Dr. Chloe Lai. Dr. Lai is a journalist turned urbanist. She has a PhD in comparative literature. History of the present is her favorite way to see the world and research focus. Chloe is a practitioner of sustainability. She believes that knowledge transfer and heritage conservation are part of and parcel of social progress. She helped found a library with a strong focus on arts and humanities in Causeway Bay, I just learned. Dr. Lai is currently the chairperson of the Conservancy Association Center for Heritage. Please join me in giving our speakers a big hand. So tonight we will be having presentations from each of the speakers. We hope that there will be a fruitful conversations among us and with you. And then we hope that through the projects they're going to present, and I can promise you, these are not projects that you will often see in media or newspaper. And then we hope to explore subjects not so much about the iconic, the architectural style or anything like that, but more about the relationship between architecture or heritage with community, with sustainability, development, and hopefully technology as well. So without further ado, let me now pass the mic to Cecilia, who is going to take us to the UK. Thank you.
Is this working? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Douglas, for this very great introduction. I also want to thank the Consul General of France and Asian Society Hong Kong Center for hosting us. So as we have mentioned, that our perceptions of the nature of heritage has been constantly evolving according to a specific context. So to contribute to this discussion, I'd like to talk about one example of heritage outside Hong Kong. This is Park Hill, which is a public housing estate in Sheffield, UK, that has recently been remade into a heritage property. But the story of Park Hill's transformation is more complex. When it was first built in the 1950s, it was conceived as a great modernist icon. In the 1970s, it became a kind of eyesore or hated building seen by the public. And finally, in the 21st century, it was reincarnated as modern heritage worthy of conservation. By discussing the changes of Park Hill, I hope to invite a more critical reflections on our own shifting assumptions and values ascribed to modern architecture in our own city. So this is Park Hill in the 1950s. At the time, the largest, At the time, it was the largest council housing estate in Britain and a shining example of the welfare state that represented UK's commitment to provide well-designed housing for the working class and to foster a strong sense of community. The rhetoric of equalitarianism was embraced by the estate's architects, Ivor Smith and Jack Lynn, who were committed to show how modern architecture could fulfill its social potential. The design itself was influenced by new approaches to urban living, such as the so-called streets in the air, which replicated the social functions of street life within the tower blocks. The progressive intent was also articulated in the brutalist style of the buildings, using unfinished concrete to emphasize the imprint of labor. But the high esteem of Park Hill did not last. By the late 1960s, many structural problems became apparent, but the real reason was economic decline, with the collapse of the steel industry and global stagflation. Rising employment was made worse by the introduction of the right to buy policy, which allowed the local government to sell off council flats at discounted rates to homeowners, thereby leading to growing divide between the deserving and undeserving poor. By the mid-1990s, 1/3 of the flats in Park Hill became emptied, and many others were occupied by the poorest tenants. Many Sheffield citizens began to refer to Park Hill as a slum in the sky and called for its demolition. So it was ironic when Park Hill was awarded a listed status by English Heritage in 1998 to recognize its exceptional architectural value. The move reflected a growing interest of heritage groups in re-evaluating post-war social housing, which was fast disappearing through urban renewal processes. In 2004, a property firm named Urban Splash was entrusted to transform Park Hill from a sink estate into market-rate condominiums. The brutalist identity of the buildings would be retained as the selling point, and the signature streets in the sky would be preserved. But to attract wealthier residents, the buildings would become gated, and some parts were leased to upscale retail shops, restaurants, and offices. Public opinion soon turned in favor of conserving Park Hill, which is now recast as heritage of post-war modernism, as represented in many beautiful images showing its brutalist features. But it must be said that despite encouraging new appreciation of post-war heritage, the celebration of Park Hill's transformation into a more upscaled complex also turned the original architectural intention on its head. That is, the commitment to providing public housing for the masses, which was built upon the social ideal of equalitarianism. I think that the story of Park Hill offers us many fruits for thought. One is that it shows that the sentiments towards post-war buildings, once widely seen as ugly and even hated, have drastically changed over time. And this can only be explained by contextualizing them against the changing economic order that shaped our assumptions. I'll conclude my part of the talk with two images. These are public engagement activities organized by Docomomo Hong Kong 2 years ago. The left is called Architecture We Love to Hate, which was a guided tour to 15 controversial modernist buildings in Hong Kong, with some of them facing threats of demolition. Participants were asked to reflect on their own shifting perceptions of these structures, and some questions include, why are these buildings being deemed ugly and worthless by some but treasured by others? What are the bases for forming these different opinions? How do judgment made by professionals and the general public affect the perceived values of built landscapes and their fate in ongoing development? I think I'll just end with these questions here about the love-hate relationship with modern architecture and the embedded contradictions in how we reassess or indeed rethink the notion of heritage through the modernist legacy of our built environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia, for the presentation and also this interesting topic about Park Hill. I think, before I pass on time to Richard, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. In relation to the Park Hill project, if you look at its significance today, what would you say is this heritage? What is its biggest contribution to the community living there?
Well, I mean, I think that the context is a little bit complex because there was a contradiction of what actually happened with Park Hill in the 1970s that did not really live up to its original commitment of the rhetoric of providing housing for the masses. But now, as we look back at some of the architects to reevaluate buildings, it reminds them of the legacy when there was a trust in the government and some of the values that ascribe to these buildings. So I think that in order to understand the buildings, we should get beyond just the brutalist aesthetics and just looking at them as beautiful modernist icons, but to really understand the communities, how they lived in these buildings before, and the kind of aspirations ascribed to these buildings, that once upon a time, people looked to these buildings as something that they trust, and there was a different ways of relating to these buildings. So how these relations actually have changed over time is the most important thing to in re-evaluating these buildings, the complex relations. Yeah.
So Cecilia, for this particular project, do you think that in the UK it has started a movement, or this is sort of like quite an isolated example of brutalism, or has it actually attracted a following, or in terms of the policy, in terms of revitalizing these housing estates? Is this an example which the other cities in the UK or Europe they are following as a good example?
It definitely has been a movement, I think, in the last 10, 15 years. One is about the reappreciation of these kind of brutalist style buildings and what they represent. And now, together along with this concern with sustainability, that we need to conserve some of these sort of existing built assets. And it's really have enlivened and kind of generate new interest in how to rethink what these buildings means at this moment in time. And not just in the UK, obviously, also in other parts of Europe and also in America as well. But what's really interesting is the legacy of public housing in the US and UK is quite different from the kind of public housing legacy we have here. So I think by looking at these examples might also what we try to do into rethink about the 1970s and 80s, the kind of these sort of very, we're not exactly brutalist, but the kind of the more simple modernist buildings, what it means to us. And there is a beginning of the reappreciation that our aesthetic values have changed as well. I think that some of the participants in our activities also debated about why are these buildings beautiful, are they ugly? And I think through these debates, it also allows us to expand our understanding and sometimes even change the ways that we look at our built environment and appreciate them more.
Cecilia, one final question from me, then maybe I'll introduce Richard to his topic. I see at your very last slide, there's a mention of Louvre Estate. Yes. Do you want to say something about it, or you want to save it for later? I see you mentioning lessons from Louvre Estate, also public housing we're talking about, and we also hear about redevelopment plans. So from your perspective, what would be the relationship between Park Hill and Louvre Estate if we are going to learn from them?
Well, the Louvre Estate, this event that we organized was deliberately try to understand the different intangible values in relationship to Louvre Estate, rather than just a modernist icon, because there are a lot of people now appreciating Louvre as very exceptionally well-designed buildings. But in that event, we invited different artists to come and present some of the materials. You can see that there is images showing the stack of letters of the residents, that for them to narrate their stories of their own relationship with that built environment, how they grew up, and their own maybe attachment to that environment. Sometimes it's not all, it's not really romanticizing the past, because some of these experiences are not necessarily the best and perfect stories, because there are a lot of struggles over time to adapt to these environments, and and facing demolition, there is also a lot of anxieties around this. So I think that the emotions tying to the buildings, understanding the different individuals of that community, their relationship with the buildings, these stories are the most important that we need to understand. It's not just about the fabric of the building itself, but also the community and the people living in it. So that's the kind of different stories we want to try to bring out, so that in the future we can think of how best to address the needs of, I guess, the social needs of the people living in these environments.
Thank you. I think this is a good time for Richard to join us, Professor Richard Klein from Paris. Richard will be sharing with us also a very interesting subject or project relating to public housing as well. So, Professor Klein, are you with us online? Can you hear us?
I'm with you.
Oh, thank you. Welcome to you.
Sense. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well.
Fine.
So where are you going to take us today?
Well, thank you for this presentation, and thank you for your invitation, of course. Well, the first speaker was very, of course, tied to the fact I want to tell you. Please, can you put the next slide, please? Thank you. Well, since 2003, the French government has decided a vast program of renovation of social housing estates. This program, in fact, largely consists of the systematic destruction of social housing built between 1945 and 1975. And of course, this program consists of partly their replacement with new housing. These decisions are made very frequently without any consideration of the architectural quality, historical or heritage value of the housing, of this kind of housing complexes, called in France, as you know, perhaps grands ensembles. Grands ensembles is a very interesting name because ensemble means together and mean complex of housing. So this is a very nice signification, you know. For 20 years, the most common representation disseminated in the media are therefore images of demolition, which in fact accentuates the disrepute of the architecture built after the Second World War. Next slide, please. For 20 years, research in history of architecture, of contemporary architecture, has shown the diversity, in fact, of these grands ensembles, but also the positive representation in fact, that represented this architecture at the time of their construction. This architecture of mass housing where appear close to the aesthetic of the 20th century, that of, for instance, geometric abstraction or kinetic art. Even the most radical architectures are the subject of rewarding photographic reports, for instance, here in the magazine L'Oeil, which is an art magazine quite well known in France. Next images, please. Recently, museum institutions have understood this so well that they are interested by traces of the design of these grands ensembles. For instance, the Pompidou Center has in its collection drawings of or models of this collective social housing. While, for instance, the Cité de l'Étoile in Bobigny, in the vicinity of Paris, designed by Candilis, Josic and Woods, was particularly under demolition. Visitors could contemplate the models in the museum. The Cité de l'Étoile is now renovated with care, and it's a kind of a good example of a success in reservation of a grand ensemble in France. Next slide, please. On April 2022, the newspaper Le Monde offered an interview with Renaud Epstein. The title of the paper was "Each Grand Ensemble Has Its Postcards." Renaud Epstein has just published a book entitled "We Have Arrived Well, Le Tour de France des Grands Ensembles." The illustrations come from his collection of postcards, which, according to him, illustrated a disappearing world. Next slide, please. As early as 2007, an artist, Mathieu Pernaut, exposed this paradoxical situation in his own way. His work based on enlarged postcard that showed the inhabitants of and the buildings in which they lived. Other images, of course, showed this building being destroyed. Well, I wonder really if this disappearing world is not a legacy that needs kind attention, an heritage, and perhaps, in fact, the real monuments of the 20th century. Thank you for your attention.
Professor Klein, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for sharing the interesting examples with us. I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit more about these public housing estates. As we know, many of them carry a very important function, if you will, in this society. That is, I think, the government has to provide adequate housing to those in need. So by preserving some of these buildings, some of them built maybe from the 60s or so, perhaps not equipped with what we would expect for modern day apartments or living conditions. How in the process did the government convince the public or those who are living there to support this initiative to preserve these buildings rather than building new ones?
Well, in fact, we have to realize that the situation are very, very different between these housing complexes. because sometimes the housing are in fact in a very good constitution, and sometimes there is not really a great problem to change, to renew them. And sometimes, of course, this is a great problem. It depends, because of course there is not exactly a normativity of this kind of housing. The grands ensembles are very, in fact, different. And of course, the necessity of knowledge is the first step to recognition of this kind of building, because, of course, when you have knowledge of the difference of the specificity of this building before renew it, it's the best way, in fact, to get a very good relation with the existing building and a new way to change it. The problem is sometimes that there is no, in fact, knowledge before deciding the demolition and destruction of this kind of housing.
Professor Klein, may I also ask you, in relation to keeping these buildings, I think one of the considerations from my reading is that I think the government also pays very, I would say, important attention to the minimalization of construction waste, or created by demolishing these buildings. And also the factor about sustainability, or what we should keep rather than destroying these buildings. Now, I think it's a very important consideration in the redevelopment of these housing and also in the communities. Could you please tell us more in relation to this direction in our consideration about heritage conservation in France, perhaps? How important is the consideration of sustainability?
Well, the question is very interesting, because there is a big debate now about this question in France on account of the two sides of consideration. The first side is of course, the consideration of people who want to destroy it, to change the images of the grands ensembles and the public, in fact, policy about housing. And the second part is, well, we have to take care of the cost of the destruction and the consequences of destruction about sustainability. Because in fact, when we take care of the incidence of the destruction, it is almost evident that it's a great problem for sustainability. And we have a great supporter in this second part of the consideration, because the Pritzker Prize was given to a team of architects named Lacaton and Vassal. And they are, in fact, they are convinced that we have to transform without any demolition. We have to renew the existence without demolition. And this is a very interesting consideration, talking about what you were saying in the introduction, for instance, how to keep emotion, how to keep, for instance, the building where people they lived and they can walk just in a basement saying, well, I was living there, even if it's transformed. It is very important for, in fact, emotional consideration and souvenir of fact of the place where they were living. So this is a very, very interesting debate nowadays about this question in France.
Thank you, Professor Klein. Due to time, I think I would now pass the mic to Chloe, who is going to bring us back to Hong Kong and and she will be introducing us to a very interesting project. And I think this is also a project that most of you, at least when Chloe first introduced to me, I had absolutely no idea that there's such a beautiful, iconic or heritage village in Hong Kong. So Chloe, perhaps to you now, and then we will
sure.
take more questions later.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Douglas. So, in your introduction, you've been talking about the change. You're stressing the changing definition, changing meaning of heritage, and then the case that I'm going to share with you this evening highlights the evolving meaning of heritage. The photograph you're seeing is a beach. It's called Shui Hao Beach. And Shui Hao is the case I'm going to share with you this evening. Shui Hao is a village in the largest island in Hong Kong, in Lantau. And then you can see the beach is beautiful, and then people called it Mirror of the Sky. So it's been pretty popular in recent years. Shui Hao is the village of Shui Hao has roughly 350 years of history. And then the two photographs you're seeing here, one is an old one is a new one. The one on the left-hand side was taken in 1988, and the other one is Shui Hao now. So the meaning of the Shui Hao in Cantonese or in Chinese is mouth of a waterway. So the name of the village explains its geography. It has about 200 inhabitants. And as I just said, it was built about 350 years ago. And half of the current population, half of them are descendants of the family, of the three families that founded the village. And then half of them are people moving from the urban area. They were attracted to the village because of the fresh air, because of the natural setting, on also less expensive property prices. And then you can see that you can, from the two photographs, you can also see the layout of the village. So this is the Lantau Peak here. There is this cluster, the houses cluster, at the lower part of the Lantau Peak, and then they're facing the sea. So this area is south of the houses are the sea. And then in the old photographs, you can see people are still practicing farming. You can see images of paddy fields. And then in the present photographs, you can see that nature has taken over. So there are bushes and grasses. And then in between, separating the houses and the paddy field, the old paddy fields, is a road. It was built in 1955 for the construction of a reservoir. The reasons of the paddy field or farming being abandoned is quite easily understand. Urbanization and industrialization attracted the younger generation to the urban area. So, increasingly, nobody is practicing farming in the village. So it was taken over by nature. And over the past years, it is a little-known village, so I'm not surprised Douglas has not heard of it. It has gained importance because of people realized the beach is beautiful. So they so in the past 3-4 years, in a regular summer weekends, you can see hundreds of even thousands of visitors going to the beach and then and playing there and enjoying themselves there. So there's an environmental issue there because the beach itself is quite frail, the biodiversity situation. But that is another side of the story. And so this slide, it shows you the geography of the village. So the village is in the southern part of Lantau. North of it is, we have the airport and then a new town. And then on the eastern side is we have Disneyland, eastern side of the island. So you can see the impact of you can see the impact of urbanization and development to the village. Okay, so what I'm going to share is that there is this restoration project which has just been started, and then it was supported by the government. In this project, we are going to restore 3 houses. This is the photograph you can see on the left-hand side. Is one of the 3 houses that that the project is going to restore. It is a house that the family used to store farming equipments. We learned from talking to the villagers that, or maybe I learned it, I'm not sure, maybe many of you already knew it, but I did not when I first approached them. So for example, farming families, when they, in the past, they may have a dozen properties across the village, but then not every houses are used for accommodations. Some of the houses, for example, this one is for storing farming equipments, and they may also have structures that using to store drying and storing hay, or there may be structures for sheltering cow. And then the other photographs is the natural heritage you can find in the village. Sorry, I'll go back. So for example, butterfly is famous for having lots of butterflies, and then cows as well. So this is actually the former paddy field taken over by nature, and then there are quite a number of the inhabitants, including cows as well. So what we are going to do, the team is a multidisciplinary team. We consist of architects from ASHK, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and my team, which are mainly culturalists and writers. And of course, also in the team are the villagers. So one part of the project is about the physical, restoring some physical structures. And another part of the project is about cultural mapping. We collect stories of the inhabitants. When we are talking about their stories and why we want to collect their stories, it is because through collecting their stories, we will understand not only their past and present, but we understand the interconnection between this village and the nearby settlements. We understand the interconnection between Lantau and the nearby islands. We understand the relationship between the inhabitants and the nature. And we also understand the impact of urbanization and globalization. So the photographs I've used they're taken from a film we made about the village a couple of years ago. We featured 3 grannies in the film, in which we document the folk songs these 3 grannies used to sing when they were kids or when they were in their teenagers, when they were young. So this seemingly unremarkable everyday experience, why were they important? Because they don't only shed light about our past, help us understand our present. They are not only relevant, help us to inform us how to restore the built structure, but they also informed us how to live harmoniously with nature. And of course, I have no intention to romanticize, for example, the past or the tradition. There are ills in tradition. For example, such as the status of women in traditional walled village. However, there are areas that we can learn from them in order for us to live a sustainable future. So when we are started, when we're invited to the panel, we're asked the question, we're given the question of what makes heritage. I think it is very difficult to define heritage. As Douglas has said, there's no right or wrong answer. But we can see that from our sharing this evening from social housing to an ordinary village in Lantau, we can see that the changing value and aspiration in our societies affects how we understand heritage. And also changes our approach and objectives when we come to heritage or heritage restoration. And there's always this process. And in this particular process, we work with the villages very closely. And then this changing meaning about heritage highlights the role knowledge, power, and discourse play in the formula of what makes heritage. So this is what I'm going to conclude my sharing. Thank you, Douglas, and everyone, and the speakers as well.
Thank you, Chloe, for an interesting presentation on Soihao. My question to you would be, I think when you mention heritage in your context of Soihao, you are talking about whole village. And obviously we're not just talking about the houses. And
Right.
Can you elaborate a little bit as to the heritage elements of this project, especially I think on the community that is living there? I mean, how are these buildings and the community, how do they interact? And in this case, do you fear that as the villages grow older and the younger generation actually leaving the village to go to work in the city or whatever, are you concerned that this village would disappear at some stage?
Thank you for the question. It's a difficult question. Difficult to predict what's going to happen in the future. But in a way, we are quite, in terms of whether the village will disappear, we are quite optimistic that it will not. Hopefully, because first of all, the village itself is a living village, although half of the current population are people from the urban area. However, half of them are still local, indigenous villages. And then we can see that, I think also because we keep talking about the changing aspirations and changing values, we have started seeing over the past couple of years, we can see that the younger generation have started moving back. Because they see in the past, maybe they think that the urban area attracts, provides more opportunities, and then values are changing, right? So they can see that gradually more younger generation people see the value of going back to the village, going back to their heritage, whether it is the nature or the intangible cultural practices. And then hopefully, by working with them, we can help bring out more about the village, and we can help bring back more younger generation people.
Chloe, do you prefer more people to know about this village and visit the village? Or do you prefer that we don't, well, only maybe the audience here and those online, now with your introduction, we are aware of the existence of this village. I mean, what is best for the future of this heritage? More people showing concern, and then we go there and showing our love, and more people studying it, or we better leave it alone?
Right. That is always a very difficult situation, because we actually faced that situation a couple of years ago, because I just mentioned that we made a film about the village, and then after we finished the film, we showed the film in the village town hall, and when we are showing the film and we also organizing exhibition, when you're organizing an event, of course you want more people to know your event, right? Or you want to have more audience. However, on the other hand, you also know that whether it's the physical environment or the people there, they may not, it may not be a very good situation. The physical environment is frail, and then we also, of course, we don't want to bring unwanted disturbances to the inhabitants. So we faced that situation before, and our choice is really about, we prefer giving up the volume. So instead, we prefer people, like-minded people, go to the village to appreciate and learn about it. And yes, I think that is a very good question, and for us to keep thinking how to strike the balance when we're working with the villagers to restore the houses, to find out its cultural heritage, to promote the village, but then on the other hand, not bringing irreversible damages. That is the question of sustainable development that we'll have to keep working and figuring out how to do the work.
Thank you, Chloe. At this time, I would like to open to the floor to ask questions. Does anyone have any questions for our speakers and their presentations? Oh, gentleman over there, could someone please pass a mic? Gentleman on the fourth row, please. Yes.
I would like to ask three speakers here what they think about this controversy recently about the jumbo restaurant, floating restaurants. Are they structures that we should decide to destroy? Are they structure who belongs to the community? Or are they private structures that anyone can do what he wants with it, including to sing them? I think it's a serious question, actually, because it's a part also of the heritage of Hong Kong and an iconic, I will say, floating building that exists for so long. And so we will disappear from all the history of the guide of Hong Kong. So why actually the government or people like you didn't make any petition to do something about it, to at least raise the questions? Do you want to keep it, or do you want to erase it to the actual population? So I would like to have your opinion about it, or your action, if you plan to make any action to, why not to take it back where it is now since yesterday, I think. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think I will give the time to Cecilia and Chloe. For Richard, I don't know whether it's in international news. We had this very sad incident yesterday regarding a jumbo floating restaurant we had in Hong Kong that was well loved by, I say, many generations of Hong Kongers. And yesterday we heard the terrible news that the floating restaurant actually capsized, after it has left Hong Kong, and it seems that now it's probably beyond rescue. And so today, I think I think it's not just myself. We look at all social media and print media. That's headline news number one. So perhaps I'll ask Chloe and Cecilia to share their thoughts on this.
And then we will ask you your thoughts. Just very quick from me. I think I don't know really the jumbo restaurant that well, but I think incidents like that is very interesting because it's very sad on one hand, but it also brings up all sorts of questions of what is heritage. I think for me, the most important question is that going back to also the presentations, is asking the question of heritage and conservation for who? And what are the kind of different and maybe competing values that we ascribe to this particular piece of heritage. I think that if we can have some kind of more critical debates about what it means to Hong Kong and what it means to maybe people outside Hong Kong, then we can come up with a better, maybe a critical definition. And that will also help us not only to understand Jumbo as heritage itself, but also using these kind of questions to ask other kinds of heritage that we are considering or protecting. So I'm not giving an answer at all in a way, but I think that it's very important to ask for whom and what is the social values of this heritage and who will it benefit if we're going to protect them. It cannot be just for a small group of people or just one or two communities. We need to identify the different communities associated with this particular heritage on their own terms in different ways. So I think that's what I would, that's my thoughts.
Chloe?
Okay, thank you for the questions. We were talking about that when visiting there, whether there would be questions about Jumbo. Okay, so yes, there was a lot of discussions since last night when the news broke that the ship sank. There's also conspiracy theories that it was a deliberate action, but I personally doubt it because if you sink a ship, there's lots of work involved if you really want to sink a ship. I think that the question, it is very sad, as Cecilia has said, it is a very sad thing happened. On the other hand, it is a very complex issue. First of all, why Jumbo is not able to survive? Why it has to, why the owner has to close down the restaurants, even though it has a glorious history? Is it because of the business model or because of whatever, many reasons why the people stop going there? One of the reasons is COVID, but the fact that the business is not doing very well even before COVID. And then Cecilia talked about the debate, that we should have a debate in society, or a discussion in society, how we want the Jumbo to be taken care of. Unfortunately, we did not have time for that debate because when we heard, the public only learned the news possibly about a month ago, maybe, I don't remember how exactly when, that the government decided, the Ocean Park decided not to restore Jumbo as the government announced a year ago. And then within a very short period of time, the ship was sent away. So I think, again, it renewed the discussion in society of our heritage conservation. And it's always, it always involves lots of discussion. And I think, yes, there's no right or wrong answer, but it's a very sad thing. And we keep talking about it, we have to improve our heritage conservation. But there are buildings we cannot preserve. But on the other hand, we can see that there are more buildings we can preserve. So I think that is the reality. And of course, it requires more people agree with the notion that Jumbo or old buildings need to be preserved. And yes.
Yes, it was a very unfortunate incident. If I may just say one or two words about it. Currently, our regulatory regime in Hong Kong in relation to the grading of heritage, unfortunately, does not apply to a vessel. Now, we only look at buildings and structures, and for this one, it's not. But I think the real issue in the last month, as we have seen all the discussions and then all the efforts made, I think we all appreciate the historical value of Jumbo. And I think, people talk about so many incidents, what happened there, and I think people talk about their fond memories there. People got married there, and they share all the photos they're taking at Jumbo. But I think the real issue is, do we have a long-term sustainability plan if we are going to keep Jumbo? Obviously, we could, there were different suggestions asking the government to come in, asking Jockey Club to come in, asking other white knights to come in, but no one wanted to. Why? We have to ask. And in the end, if no one comes in, then what are we going to do with it? What is the right of the owner of a private, even I call it a heritage? What are their rights? Still in this city, we respect private ownership. I'm not saying that this is ideal or this is right or wrong when it comes to Jumbo. But in the end, they have the right to make a decision to have it sail out of Hong Kong. And what happened afterwards, God knows. And it's most unfortunate, but do we really have to have a system to protect Jumbo? If we do not have a white knight, if we do not have someone or a business model which is workable to continue Jumbo as a going concern, who should be bearing this burden going forward? I think we have to balance all these figures. That would be my observations.
I must say that if
yes,
it's
Professor, I'm sorry. Yes.
I must say that I'm not very afraid for the memory of Jumbo, because of Jumbo restaurant, of course, because it will stay in many pictures and it will stay in many movies, of course, because he is quite well known in of course, this kind of representations. So I'm very quiet with the memory of Jumbo restaurant, in fact, because I read somewhere that is in place in a movie of Stefan Soderbergh, I think, and so his memory will be kept all along the years.
Thank you, Professor. Because of time, we have to wrap up here. But before I do that, I actually would, I think, like to ask all the speakers to share one thought with us, and that is, if they could see or would like to see change in one area in relation to heritage, what would that be? What would a suggestion that they would like to provide to the policymakers? Perhaps Jumbo could be an idea, but if you have an opportunity, and I'm sure some of us here are from the government colleagues, and if they are willing to listen to your suggestion, what would be the one suggestion that you would like them to take home?
Okay, thank you. I'll share my thought first. I would like to see a thorough investigation about the stakeholders, wherever the site is, before any decisions being made. The first step is a thorough investigation of the stakeholders and the stories of the stakeholders. That's the first step.
Okay. Cecilia?
I think that maybe what I'm going to say is a little bit broad, but I think that the issue of sustainability needs to be taken more seriously, of how to address social sustainability. I think that's in a place like Hong Kong, which real estate value is very is prominent, and I think the social sustainability, the social implications of any kind of heritage conservation projects needs to be front and center, and that I think that would the community probably like to see.
Thank you. Professor, any thoughts from you? If there's a suggestion that you would like your policymaker to hear today, what would that be?
Yes, I would like to insist on the knowledge, which is for me the first step of the consideration of buildings and the best way to get balance between, for instance, materiality consideration as an heritage value and social dimension of the building. And the first things to do is before taking decisions of before construct a point of view is to get knowledge of building. This is very, very important for me.
Thank you, Professor. On that note, that concludes the first session of our Night of Ideas on Heritage. May I invite you to give a round of applause to our speakers for sharing a wonderful project with us. And thank you for being with us. And I'd like to ask you to stay on. We will have the second session starting at 8 o'clock. We will be touching on a lot of other interesting subjects about street signs, about our intangible heritage in the city, and I can promise you that will be equally exciting and intriguing. So I'll see you at 8. Thank you very much again.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Douglas, and thank you to our...
Welcome again to the Jockey Club Hall for a second roundtable of the day. This second roundtable will further discuss the emotional bond between people and heritage, as we will explore the gray areas of intangible heritage. We pass by every day. We might not pay attention to the elements that surround us on the street. Nevertheless, the neon signs, the typical mailboxes, the red, white, blue fabric, and many others can be considered reflections of the local culture. It is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage Mr. Stanley Wong, Ms. Marisa Yu, Mr. Kevin Mack, and Mr. Ken Fung, as well as our moderator Douglas So. Please take your seats.
Okay.
A very warm welcome back to the second session of the Night of Ideas. And this session, in the next hour, we're going to be discussing, exploring the streets of Hong Kong. And as we know, there are tons of treasures there. And our speakers tonight, they will tell you what we can find there, which so much represent Hong Kong in so many ways, historically, now, and then I think many of our speakers here, they are advocates and designers hoping to keep this wonderful tradition going. So let me first introduce the speakers. Our panel of distinguished speakers tonight include on my left, Ken Fung and Kevin Mack. In 2017, these two young architects, Kevin and Ken, they co-founded Street Signs Hong Kong for the promotion of signboards, streetscapes as urban cultural heritage. They explore in-depth signboard stories and building regulations of Hong Kong. Street Signs Hong Kong also conserves existing signboards facing demolition and promote a sustainable signboard culture through design practice. I'm sure if you look to the right, the brightest spot there, so that's the work of Ken and Kevin, so they will tell you more about it. Our next speaker, on the left, Marisa Yu. Marisa is the co-founder and executive director of Design Trust, an initiative of the registered charity Hong Kong Ambassadors of Design. Marisa is an architect and the founding partner of, Marisa, you have to help me. ASHK, right, ASHK, a multidisciplinary and award-winning architectural studio based in Hong Kong. She is a renowned curator and well-known in the arts, culture, and design industry. And on the far left, last but not least, is Stanley Wong, I think better known as another mountain man, Yao Ya San Yan. Actually, Stanley needs very little introduction, but I'll do it anyway. Stanley is a well-established designer, visual communicator, and contemporary artist. He gained international awareness with his Red, White, and Blue series, representing the positive spirit of Hong Kong, which he presented for Hong Kong at the 51st Venice Biennale in 2005. He is the founder of 84,000 Communications and the recipient of more than 600 awards, both locally and internationally. His works are collected by major institutions, including M+ in Hong Kong and the V&A Museum in London. Please give a big hand to welcome our panel speakers. Okay, let me start with Kevin and Ken. Kevin and Ken, they're going to talk to us about street signs in Hong Kong, why they're so precious, but at the same time, why are they disappearing? Right. So, we will look into this. And I know Ken and Kevin, they also come with very interesting suggestions and ideas as to what we can do about this scenario. So time to you.
Thank you. Here we go. Thank you. Okay, let's see.
First of all, thanks for having us here. So we're Skyline Hong Kong, and we start with our really first-hand experience with signboard. So here it is, as you can see, a little bit different from what you usually see on the streets. When we saw this sign, it's already taken down from the building facade, already lying on the ground, cut into pieces, and the neons are all smashed. At that moment, it's around 2015. We actually didn't have much thought about signboards or street signs as cultural heritage or official identity of Hong Kong. But at that time, we look at the character. So as you can see, it's not a computer font from Microsoft Word. We thought there's some values behind it. And then we talked to the demolition worker and asked if we can keep it. And that is basically the beginning of our journey into signboard preservation.
And then at that time, we also look into why they are disappearing and what they means to the city. So we go to different districts in Hong Kong. For example, this one in Sham Shui Po. What you can see on the streets of Hong Kong as a streetscape, meaning that the visual identity and what really people remembers on the streets are actually the signs and not the architecture behind them. So what we think was these are actually more important sometimes than the buildings. As an architect with architecture backgrounds, that's actually very shocking for us to see these kind of things disappearing while we can only build the buildings behind them. So we try to look at the trend, maybe the next slide. Actually, this picture was actually taken only 1 month after the first pictures. And we were amazed by how efficient our city is by disappearing, like what we talk about in panel 1, jumbo. So at that time, we thought this is actually amazing. We should do something to this.
So basically, we go back and try to find out what is the reason behind all this disappearance of signboards from our streets. It's actually back in 2010. There's an introduction of a new regulation, basically including all the signboards of Hong Kong under the building control, under building regulation. And also at the same time, almost all maybe nearly all of the existing signs at that time would be deemed as illegal structures. And the building department could issue demolition orders to have them taken down. So we felt as architects, we might be able to use our professional knowledge to help shops that receive these kind of orders and help to explore ways to preserve these signboards. So for example, as you can see here is one of the cases we received from the shop owner. The restaurant is closed already, but they thought the sign has an iconic it's an iconic feature on the street. So they're trying to preserve the sign at its original location. But however, under the current regulation, even though there's a mechanism for it to remain in the city, but then if the dimension of the signboard is exceed what is limited by the current regulation, which is the red box in the picture, then it has to go. So so that's why we try to look at, is there any other possible ways for it to remain in our streets? And then since all the signboards are under building regulation control, so we take a look at how historic buildings are assessed in Hong Kong, which is an area of expertise of Douglas. And also we thought it is a perfect occasion to talk about it because ASHK Society is home to several Grade 1 and Grade 2 historic buildings. So as you can see on the left, it's the assessment of historic buildings in Hong Kong. So as you can see, there's all sorts of historical, cultural, and aesthetic values being considered. But then if you look on the right side, for signboards, although there's like a validation scheme that is in place for existing signboards to exist in our city, what they consider is merely dimensions and structural integrity. So that's why through our work, through researchers, we're trying to see if any of this on the left could be included to this mechanism on the right.
So for now, it's difficult for us to make any political policy change. But so far, we have been working hard to push for this culture to be more sustainable in the past few years. So what we do is actually rescuing some signs from shops. Sometimes they donate to us. Sometimes we just find on the streets because they, after the demolition, they just trash them. So when it happens, we rescue them, take them to our archive. In some occasions, in some exhibitions, we actually restore them. Like today, if you go to the Louvre, or you might have already been, there are 3 of the bronze signs on the Louvre here. One of them was original, rescues from the shops, and the other 2 were restored. The roster over there is all original. So by promoting the culture through exhibiting them, we try to kind of educate the society, of course, and also sometimes we work with the local craftsmen, like Mr. Wu here. He restored some of the neon signs for us with the very experienced hands from him. And sometimes we also work with other design companies and other areas of people, like the trees. It's a Christmas tree over there. For example, in this case, we actually also work with local craftsmen, Mr. Wu, and then, but it's already jumping a bit out of the original area of signboards, and it's more into art, into also installations, but we do all this to actually help, try to help to sustain the culture, to try to also sustain the crafts. So I hope you also enjoy the artworks over there at the rooftop today, and yeah, and also to spread the love of signboards to others, and to also maybe some of you might be future shops owners. So if you really want to sustain the culture, you can also build your own sign in neon. It's also legal to build neon now.
Thank you, Ken and Kevin. My first question to you is, I mean, what is the magic about these neon signs? I mean, obviously they serve a purpose, and the reason why the shop owners install them is because they want people to see their shops or their business from afar, and then it attracts customers. I guess, you know, that's the business reason, primary business reason. But nowadays, as you know, we have technology, we have the digital screens, and we have LED lights and things. So tell us, you know, what are the differences? What's so attractive about the neon signs? And what would you say to shop owners to promote or to convince them that this is the way to go?
In reality, actually, it was very hard to convince them, indeed. Because, yeah, obviously, based on technology and the current habits of people going to shops, they don't need to look at the sign to find their way to the shop. They look at their phone just in the screen. That's already good enough as a kind of function to find the shop. However, what we find important in the physical signs or the beauty in it is the craftsmanship, and also how the physical signs, the existence of these signs, help to shape the identity of the shops. Also, is actually for some cases, they actually shape the area. where the shops belongs to. For example, the chicken over there was one of the landmarks in Yaomate. And everyone, when they go to Temple Street at the very beginning of that, people remember it's there. And then they know, oh, I'm in the area. But now it's gone, and then people really, some people really cannot find their way anymore. So I think this is kind of the by kind of sub-function of the sign, and it's actually beyond function, and it's more than, it's also related to memory, identity, that the image that the shop is trying to create for them.
Yeah, I see. So you just shared with us about your proposal for the signboard validation scheme assessment. Can you tell us more about how this scheme works, and how are you going to convince again our policymakers that we should be keeping these signs for the sake of Hong Kong? And then this is a scheme which will address, I think, some of the issues that the policymakers or our regulators are fear of. And obviously, I think one of them being the safety of these signs. As you remember from the pictures of Hong Kong you see in the 70s and 80s, full of signs, especially, for example, at Nathan Road. But then if you do your maths, I mean, these signs would have been 40 years old, 50 years old, and maybe even older. And many of the shops have since disappeared, and they disappeared without removing the signs. And so a lot of these signs, I think, at one stage, they haven't been maintained for a long, long time. So how are you going to convince the government that, okay, if they relax or use a scheme and allow these signs to take the streets again, so how do you measure it or balance it against public safety?
So actually, this scheme is in place already since 2013. But maybe let me go into a little bit of a dry details here. At that time, there was around several hundred thousands of signs in Hong Kong, meaning most of them are illegal. But then only less than 1% of the sign went through this validation scheme in trying to keep it on the streets. And within that 1%, it's only a very small percentage that really succeed in keeping it on the streets. So we see there is like this mechanism, but then all these requirements from the mechanism making it very difficult for the signs to remain where they belong to, which is on the streets. So from then on, most of the signs has been demolished from the streets, and then most of the more iconic ones are almost gone. So, for example, Sunbeam Theatre is one of the remaining iconic ones that are still on the streets. So at this point, where there's a very few number of iconic signs still in Hong Kong, we're trying to promote, to relax this system, to introduce a proper grading system, considering all the cultural, historical, and aesthetic values of individual signs, and then to grant exceptions for them, even if they are slightly larger than the permitted dimensions, but still be able to remain.
Can we tell which ones are legal and which ones are illegal just by looking at them?
There is a pretty straightforward way. So all the new build signs that went through the legal requirements has a number next to it on the side. Usually start with an MW and a series of numbers. So those signs usually they're much smaller than the old ones, which is the result of the regulation. But from the outside, you can still tell which ones are legals and which ones are the old ones.
I understand that museum institutions in Hong Kong, such as M+, and also the Heritage Museum, I think they have been collecting these street signs for a while. Do you think in the long term that these signs actually belong to the museum rather than they should, or they will make a comeback in the streets, looking at the way that it goes now?
Right. Yeah, that's actually a dilemma for us as well. We are rescuing them, but we cannot put them back on the street all the time. So in that kind of thoughts behind, we think that in fact, in the past, when shops replace or fix their signs, actually they would sometimes replace the whole thing. But what they keep when they replace their old signs, the original characters, the calligraphy, for example, the design elements, or the materials such as neon, or some also beautiful materials such as copper sign, another mountain, and as we're just talking about these kind of very rare materials that are very beautiful and are disappearing as well. So these kind of things, we think that should be able to be replaced and rebuilt, actually. And actually, by educating them the values and the beauty behind, we thought maybe this is the more long-term goal for us as well than keeping them somewhere else.
So is this, if we look at the sign like the rooster there, obviously it's very eye-catching. I was just wondering, for this type of, I think a lot of people would call them even artwork now, street art, or the type of special craftsmanship. Are we talking about a craftsmanship which is of the past and we are preserving it? Or do you see a return for the demand for these signs, but also, do you see innovations and technology, new technology being used and incorporated to make these signs, I think, 2022 signs, for Hong Kong, rather than something from the 1960s and 70s?
Yeah, so in terms of technology, so all we know about neon is it's very power consuming, it's potentially dangerous. But new technology using like new electronic transformer actually reduce the power consumption by a great deal. So it's a more green way to move forward with using neon. And also neon, as you can see on the sign, is made of individual tubes. So if one of them breaks, it can be replaced individually. So compared to LED, it's made in one piece. If like one dot goes out, you might have to replace a whole panel of it. Mm-hmm. So the old technology is still like, there's some ways could be preserved in like moving forward. And then the other thing is like neon in the old days is mainly used for making signs. But as we can see, it's also moving into art and installation. For example, the Christmas tree that we did with another design company and also a hotel, which is in a way challenging the craftsman in how he make the neon tubes. For example, for signs, it's pretty 2D. So there's a blueprint, and then he can bend the tube with the heat and then measure it onto the blueprint directly. For example, the Christmas tree is like it's actually going 3D like a roller coaster rail. For the craftsman, it's a really challenge to his craft. So with this kind of like back and forth, we are trying to use an old craft and try to apply it into new applications.
I know Marissa and Stanley, you have created many shows and curated many shows and exhibitions involving street culture in Hong Kong, especially I think some of the most iconic elements that we all treasure and hope to preserve. I was just wondering, on this particular topic, just like to hear your observations and your experience about street signs and neon signs.
Well, to me, when you look the new generation of the signage nowadays is all LED, which is to me functional yet no aesthetic kind of emotion. Just from layman point of view, we are reading signage, right? We're users. But having said that, to compare the old days neon versus nowadays those dotted kind of functional LED signage, it's not emotional enough or engaging enough. I mean, in a more mind way, not in the beautiful or not beautiful, memory or not up to date. I mean, I don't want to just debating in such way, but just when you communicate, what is more appealing? I haven't said that. I really feel nervous and uneasy when I look at the LED signage nowadays. So I thought that's why I really want that phenomenon, the way we communicate, that neon, the appearance of the neon that will bring back. Although the technology, the craftsmanship, the artisan is fading out, I hope they will coming back. You just said there's youngsters.
Yeah.
Now they are into this technology or the craft. That's very encouraging. I wish they would come back.
Marissa?
Yeah, no,
Any
I mean,
thoughts?
I really respect what you're doing. It's truly unbelievable how both of you sweat and tears to save something and preserve it. I think for kind of more of a reaction, it's how extraordinarily just one byline in a kind of legal document can transform a city, right? It's such a powerful image and representation of our urban fabric and our history. So it is quite disappointing that one element can transform something so drastically. However, there are new ways to really reimagine them, and I think you're both exploring that, and that's really powerful. And I think what's lovely is forgetting the actual imperfection of the process of making neon sign is actually what makes it extraordinary, that process. There's recently been, maybe 8-9 years ago, a group from the university digging out hand drawings of the original seafood that do measured drawings to then mark on paper. And that kind of process of discovery, proportion, elegance, and then taking that two-dimensionality into three-dimensional kind of artisanal craft, that's lost. And how do we bring that back? I think we have to come up with new values and new processes to explore. So, but heads off to you. I mean, I really admire your work. So I feel I'm sandwiched between two amazing groups of people tonight who are advocates of our heritage. Yeah, so.
I'll give you one more my experience. A few years back, I did a concert poster for a lady singer. So happened the visuals got a big circle like a halo behind the girl, right, the singer. So the photographer told me, Stanley, we just do it in the post-production by the computer. There's a glow, right? I said, no, insist not. I got to find a craft neon, real neon, put it on the back to shoot the photo. He doesn't really convince from the very beginning, but after the shooting, then the texture, the feeling is not the same. So this is how technology somehow destroying some kind of people's emotion.
I think that's why we need important advocates like all of you to convince your clients, to convince people who are not familiar with the science, the beauty, and also I think all the if I may use the word magic of using neon signs, which give a totally different effect, which they may not appreciate from the outset, but if they see the real thing, then they know that this is the thing or the right decision to make. Just now, there's mention about this craft, which I think a lot of sifu, the masters, some of them are probably getting old and not in the trade anymore. And I heard, encouragingly, that young people are going to the trade and learning the craft. In Hong Kong, how many are we talking about approximately? Who knows this craft? And imagine there's a huge demand for these signs. Are there going to be enough people or seafood to actually produce these signs, or what are we looking at in terms of the major industry players?
Well, for the number, the fact here is that we have only 5 or 7 masters, experienced ones, who can...
5?
Yeah, like less than 2 hands kind of fingers. left in Hong Kong. So the major kind of productions goes abroad or to mainland as well. When it comes to kind of big signage production or for other kind of artworks as well, it might be outsourced. But we noticed that we just mentioned the youngster who just joins into the industry. He kind of self-learned this technique by himself, just learned from books and internet, and of course went to one of these workshops to learn a few lessons from these kind of masters. And he actually set up his own studio. And what we noticed throughout last years, since he started, was that he actually got a lot of commissions to make new artworks, small size. And I think that's the good sign for us to see actually that the trend is actually coming back. So I think when there are more people asking for this, there will be more people ready for this.
Good to know. Good to know. Due to time, we have to move on. Marissa, what do you have to share with us tonight?
Okay. Can I press this forward? Yeah, maybe a good kind of transition, because I was thinking a lot about this topic on reviving the notion of the street. However, we think about what the street is as a threshold between kind of the public realm and the kind of personal domestic realm. It allows us to kind of think about how can we challenge that dimensional threshold. So I have 5 slides. I will be brief and succinct to share 5 case studies of how heritage can be transformed, hopefully innovatively, but really there's a real urgency. And when Douglas, we had a discussion a couple weeks ago about what we can present today, I do believe, and as I tell everyone, I am a perpetual optimist, but the optimism is slowly being eroded due to many effects of how people are not acknowledging our assets and also the value of our heritage and history, whether from design to typography. So we need to train the eye, we need to train our hands, and through this process, I've been really extraordinarily privileged and humbled to meet a lot of incredible people from younger generation to masters like Stanley, who really inspire us to do more, and is this responsibility and civic urgency to really look at Hong Kong. One of the things I wanted to just also mention, I am running a very small nonprofit organization founded in 2007-8. It's been really challenging to bring together stakeholders with a pure vision of looking at design and the role of design in Hong Kong and how it can connect communities and cultures. So although we're here with the French Consulate General and Asia Society, it's just an extraordinary moment to reflect on the role that we partake in society. And I think that's something I truly believe in. We all have to participate at different gradients. So with Ndonian Chen here, what I wanted to just bring this as a case study is his really incredible work from Hong Kong Beiwei Sansu, which is a really special, significant calligraphy in Hong Kong that has numerous applications in a lot of the work we see today that signs back to the 50s. And its history is connected all the way to Southern Northern Dynasty. So more than a 1500 year of history, and then just brought to Hong Kong through 2 Guangzhou calligraphers to Hong Kong, and that really became transitional. And Ndonian, as a young design researcher grantee, discovered this. We've been doing walking tours, we've been publishing his work, and slowly disseminating his efforts in a way to really believe he can modernize his type, and how to position Hong Kong. So I think that's something really special. So if you have typographers who do Calibri, Helvetica, or Japanese kanji, there's a history to that beauty, and He's discovered and modernized and studied the font proportions and becoming an advocate and voice for Hong Kong. So I just wanted to bring this as a case study of how we can re-enliven the discussion on heritage, our values, in novel ways, and we're really excited. The second case study, actually Christine's sitting here, so I'm really thrilled she's here with us today. Flo and Christine, very, very young design researchers based now in Hong Kong, created this really extraordinary Hong Kong brick, 香港石 in one sense, during the COVID pandemic 2019. We've been thinking a lot about materials like terrazzo, the notion of making, the intellectual craft making, sustainability. How can you really use old techniques in ways that can really be inspiring to all of us? And this duality of the brick itself commemorates and gives a sort of solid, positive foundation to a lot of the reactions to the pandemic itself. And later on, 2 years afterwards, this is recently launched. They've been investigating embroidery, using 3D knitting, looking at tactility of light in a way that also looks at Chinese embroidery and advancing that technology with sensor-based techniques. And it's really, really fascinating how can we begin to utilize material craft in new ways that can present Hong Kong, right? Can present our history. And this they've called hybrid craft, and that's something I wanted to just kind of bring to light, is how do we create juxtapositions? If we want to have Hong Kong not only skyscrapers or just trodden down villages, what is that juxtaposition that allows us to hybridize and communicate our technology and our heritage? So that's another case study. Again, people who know me, I've been spending my last 10 years fighting for improvement to public space. So launched a stakeholder engagement process called Design Trust Future Studios, looking to bring a new generation of designers to produce beautiful public space parks in Hong Kong. Not too different to hopefully where you guys will go, but we managed through our process to change and reimagine policy innovation. So now, the government has announced the next 5 years they'll be reimagining 170 play spaces in Hong Kong through new types of community engagement. Mentoring Stanley Wong young designers for Hamilton, which is about to launch. We discovered a lot of beautiful neighborhood craft like mangay, the old wood chopping board, sifu. How can we utilize that in parks in a way that is unique and bespoke for the neighborhood? We have Portland Park that created a lot of controversy because of its pinkness, but however, pink reduces and calms the psychosis of the public and creates a really gentle juxtaposition to the greenery. So we've been working a lot on these efforts to connect communities, but stakeholders from the government, designers, council members, et cetera, and enliven the heritage neighborhood and the streetscape. And then just the last two slides on the kind of final case study is something very dear to me. We faced a lot of challenges, even since 2014. That's when we started our nonprofit to reimagine opportunities for younger generations to have a voice and impact, like myself, in the city, and been following these amazing conservation architects in this 1940s building, Hoppa Mansion. And we discovered this photograph on the right side on this beautiful, beautiful 6-meter carpet, but the photograph was missing from the archives. And so what we did is invited designers to be mentored by Shanghainese architects, advisors from Taiping Carpet, to really work with these young designers to recreate a new carpet, a feature carpet in this 1930s building. And what's extraordinary is what is Hong Kong, what is our heritage? And through this amazing building, we discovered it's not just Chinese Hong Kong. There's influence from India, France, there's Venice, there's Italy, there's all sorts of cultures. And this kind of cross-cultural generation really inspired us to develop something really special about, I think it took us a year and a half, about 2 years of research. And as a curator, working with Elaine from Fabric Lab and working with Taiping, these amazing artisanal carpets, 65-year-old manufacturing company. We went to Xiamen, we studied the site, and Elaine ended up recreating the 6-meter heritage moment in the lobby space using new interactive yarns, tying into and infusing into longfeng, which is a phoenix. And perfectly, if you can see, as a designer architect, this kind of transition and proposition to connect to the site. So as this is a public building now, it's not actually private house. You can see the parquet grid really connecting with the grid of the actual carpet itself. We invited young children from the community to explore the potentials of a static carpet into something dynamic. So she introduced these new interactive yarns and UV light, so the whole carpet begins to be really magical and inspiring. And you can see all the efforts on the tufting, the deep research, and the kind of manufacturing capabilities and collaboration to bring about new ways to inspire our community. So I'll end here. I always have many things to say, and I was just telling Street Sign it would be great to have a lecture just by yourself, but Stanley,
and yourself.
So yeah, thank you. I just wanted to share a few slides on our projects. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing the fascinating case studies with us. One question in my mind that you have shared with us, 5 different, I would say, wonderful designed, and I just wonder, for a lot of these are like the Hong Kong break and typography, the carpet, etc. Do you think, or what elements they will have to achieve, or what boxes they will have to tick to being recognized as a Hong Kong street heritage? The reason why I ask is, I know we use the word sometimes a bit too liberally, and I'm totally fine with it, because I'm sure if we give you an hour, you can tell us, the merits of each and every one of them. But I'm just trying to see. Just now we talk about the street signs, and I think they're well recognized. And then I think very few of us here would disagree. They are very much part of the Hong Kong street heritage. Tell us a bit more. I mean, for these, some of them are quite new, quite recent. What would you see? I mean, in the future as they develop, then at what stage would you say that, yes, they have ticked all these boxes for sure? They are Hong Kong heritage, very unique to Hong Kong.
I mean, Hong Kong has both the complexity and contradictions, right? This is why we exist. There's the kind of power of the global, the local, the neighborhood. And it's not a sanitized city. It has all pockets of inspiration potentially, right? So you can, like earlier, the amazing village in Lantau, or you have the understanding of brutalism as something we are urgently all together separately, really trying to build an archive potentially. But I do think it is a sensibility of appreciation of craft, and I would urge whoever's in the policy side to making decisions to really look at that value of craft for its history or for its future, right? So, and just say to evaluate what is Hong Kong heritage, it's so elusive, but when you see something as special as the terrazzo block with the engraved Hong Kong, right? like Vagrant Harbor or Hong Kong, you know there's something special there because it infuses the material technique. It has a story, it has a narrative, it has a value, and it's really made from the sense of space and place, from the original materials. So it kind of, in terms of looking at the essence of street, I mean, I would hate to only be going to New York just to see what Hong Kong was, or do we go to Dubai and look at Chinatown, the artificial Chinatown? Is that, you know, so I think that urgency of juxtaposition has to be brought to light now and healthily debated. And of course, all economies and societies progress, but we really need to have this sensibility of restoring, yeah, and preserving, yeah.
Marissa.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, Marissa, you, I think in the very first case study you introduced to us is about typography. I actually would like to ask, you know, Ken and Kevin, and as well as Stanley, because I know all of you work very closely, especially with typography, and your choices, and they play a big part in your work and also in your projects. I just want to hear from all the speakers here as to, you know, tell us a little bit more about, you know, how we're doing in Hong Kong in terms of our typography, our own typography, and where we are heading in that regard.
Well, actually, our logo, Street Sign Hong Kong, is by Adonian. So it's made from, yeah.
That typeface, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I.
So,
It is interesting, if you don't mind jumping. I was just also recently, because Ndonian is such a emerging superstar. He has a legacy, right? He's trained certain ways. He's influenced by different communities. But having a conversation with him a couple of weeks ago, I encouraged him. I was like, you know, in order to really expand this connection, you need to translate your book to English. And he is going soon to take a 1 year. He got a scholarship to go to New York. I'm connecting him with different design internships, right? So I think it's him embodying and a kind of a position of communicating our culture to the international audience, or maybe French audience, or different communities is healthy. And I think he's starting to realize he has that ability and voice to be the ambassador of typography in that sense for his generation. So it's really nice. He's being invited to lots of talks now, and that kind of bilingual, trilingual, his company is called Trilingua, playing with that term and being very clever about how to communicate, yeah.
I see. Stanley, your thoughts?
Of course, we really appreciate our Dorian spent so many years to do the research and yet put together as a book. Then already back to 10 to 5 years time, that long period. Then since then, a lot of graphic designer or design lovers then very into this topic. And there's many other typographer or graphic designer also get intention and do research in other perspective of becoming a big topic for last 5 years, I would say, within our graphic design field. Then the momentum keep going, I would say. But to me, I will look forward that from the revisit, that see the history, see the heritage archive, how to translate, rethink, and recreate. That is yet to come, I would say. We're still in between rethink and revisit kind of area. We have a big mileage to just translate it to something else. It keep that Hong Kong or Chinese typography kind of spirit and heritage. I look forward, actually.
And I hope, we keep up with the momentum, and let's hope that you mentioned
Like
the phenomenon is not just Hong Kong, but it will spill over to the other countries. Or maybe we're talking about Greater Bay Area. We're talking about Asia, because I can see the traction of the typography, and also creating and making this known to a wider public.
Yeah. A good sample is that like the Leon Christmas tree, than the original 60 or 70 signage. That is another dimension to look forward. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Maybe if I can add a little bit. So it was a discussion with a calligraphy friend of ours who is also in the audience. So we noticed like there's a trend right now. There's a calligraphy is sort of belongs to museum, galleries, and for actual application, if we need Chinese characters, we go to computer. So there's a big gap between calligraphy and everyday use, which was like in the old days is the same thing. If a shop need to make a sign, they go to a calligrapher to write the shop name for them. And the shop name is right specifically for the use. For example, if you are making a sign, they will make the strokes a lot broader. So from a distance, you could still read it very clearly. But then, for example, if you use a computer font, it doesn't work because it's designed for reading on screen. So this kind of like using, I shouldn't say old craft because it's still a living craft that should be applied to everyday use. And that's something that we are looking forward to.
Thank you. So now we press on. Stanley, your turn. You're going to share with us colors. Colors, which I think, whenever we talk about these colors, I think in Hong Kong particularly, a lot of people in Hong Kong would associate themselves with the colors that you're going to be sharing with us. And I think I've heard one time someone calling you Mr. this color, that color, and that color. So I'll let you talk about these colors and why. There's, again, we talk about emotions, and there's so much attachments, if you will, not just, I'm sure, not just for people in Hong Kong, but also organizers in the French and even other nations with these three colors. So to you, Stanley, please.
Okay. Okay. So, of course, people treat red, white, blue as kind of symbolize Hong Kong visually. But having said that, when we're looking back to trace what is the Hong Kong kind of icon, what's represent Hong Kong, then I would say originally the very old Hong Kong Tourism Board, or in old days called Hong Kong Tourism Association, Tourist Association, that junk boat, which the old Hong Kong symbols, because we have a lot of junk boats in our harbor, we have a lot of fishermen working here on the water. Then lately, we have the dragon, two stages of the dragon. Yes, this Hong Kong symbol, Hong Kong identity. But if I'm not writing here, I guess no one, close to no one, that we don't know what it represents. In the Bible, from the government point of view, they write down all the core values that represented by this dragon. Then, because I'm from graphic design and also from advertising on communications, then to me, this exercise, visually, yes, we see the dragon here and there on the pin, there's a Leon. Is it Leon? Is it Leon or this?
Not sure.
Okay. We have a big sign on the roof, right? It's the dragon I think in Wan Chai area. But we don't know what it represents for. Yes, that I know the dragon, but what it exactly means, we don't know. I think this is lack of communication, lack of promotion, I would say. Then, of course, then come to the red, white, blue. Yes, I did this positive spirit of Hong Kong for 20-something years now, since 2001. It didn't get my attention, as many of you, just a mundane, practical fabric in construction site, in the storefront, or the back is when we're moving home. We don't care, for honest, particularly when we're talking about back to 70 and 90. We just use it. Cheap, tough product, fabric, that's it. I confess, I put notice on this particular material because in late 80s, I was first time in London, in Soho, a very hip little boutique. I saw them as a Londoner. They sell this bag. No redesign, just original, that red label bag on the shelf. Then that changed my life. I woke up, it's mine. How come the Londoners think it's so interesting and can sell it in a high price? Then that really slapped my face. I woke up and I should consider those we belongs to us. We should treasure it. We should put an eye on it. So that's how I keep shooting pictures of the red label from after late 80s, back from London. Then I find it's a characteristic that's very tough material, protecting sun and rain and sandstones from the construction site. And also, you find them working everywhere. I'm sure you saw this material here and there every day in the city. That means they participate. They play a role to work for you. So this kind of attitude or personality, I would just exactly remember when I was born. I born 1960. That 60s and 70s, people just participate, work hard, and that's it. Then that will be a better future. That's how we believe. So that's why along that characteristic, then from then I work every occasions, invitations from museum, in public. Someone donated outdoor signage for me. I put up my red label there, work with MTR in the subway station. Corporate give me some window signage in Central. So we just keep doing this, just promoting, symbolizing this positive attitude, actually referring to 60 and 70 on 80. But we lose that since we hang over back to China. We have a negative, unsure, uncertain future that I want to remind people, can we look back and rethink what we should do. So that's how I keep doing this for 20 years. Besides doing shows, and also I publish books, I curating shows for Heritage Museum, to inviting students, other designers, architects, everyone work on this material on the Hong Kong topic. Somehow the snowball rolling out that even art book festival in Wan Chai Art Center, then asked me to decorate the whole ambient in outside art center. This one, the product, I work for a mental illness organization, New Life. I feel glad that I didn't promise someone invite me to do products when I started maybe 5-6 years, back to 2005. I don't want people confuse me, Stanley, after all, you're making money out of it. Because my intention just want to make voice, share my belief that to the audience or visitors, that I don't want to make product to gain money until this a charity organization asked me to just creating products for them. The shell factory that's producing it, I just supporting them. Until now, I'm still working with them. So this is how Of course, this is another typing project that we just presented it in a few weeks ago in Art Basel. This is not a real canvas, but it's a carpet, wool carpet that just magnifying the texture patterns about the rough and smooth Hong Kong nowadays. So, of course, I didn't have time and slides to tell you how it go to Venice, how it go to every different countries to talk about other topics. But back, just focus in Hong Kong. I want to bring this topic to just want to discuss more as, of course, when people call me Mr. Red, White, Blue, media interviewing me, you can't get away from it here and there, then I show my new works. And then you see the last 10 years, it's just a part of them. You can take out from the internet thousands of this in Hong Kong. Then government will communicate on the district kind of cultural promotion using Red, White, Blue. Designers starting getting these 3 colors subconsciously is about Hong Kong, and even commercial brand, when they talk about Hong Kong, they will put up these colors. And then when you see this side, and when you go to international brands, you can name all these French brands, Italian brands. Last 10 or 20 years, they all doing not necessarily about whatever cultural, historical manner, but in a hip, maybe fun kind of, or wow effect, visually, occasionally. Of course, you see it's interesting, the top, the corner that Samuel Hui, he's, for the youngsters here, you might not know this, our called Canto Pop King, Hui Kun Kit. Once he wearing the whole costume in Red, White, Blue on stage, and I still remember the next day in the newspaper, not close to 100, but at least 50 or 60 people calling me, congratulating me, Stanley, you did a good job. I said, not by me. But it's okay. At the end, I am a good friend with his son. He said, my father is actually referenced the way you work is along the same kind of Hong Kong good, positive spirit that I think the snowball should roll out not only by myself. I would say it's a kind of a cohesive kind of mileage if everyone into that. But on the top, I want to debate or want to bring up the question is, who create the values of it, and yet who consume these particular values? You know, there's a lot of products. It's not by the new life. There's a very they just for the commercial point of view that they're into this fabric. So that is a interesting topic. Who investing into the essence or content of it, yet who is taking advantage, just putting commercial value out of it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. Intriguing. Stanley, you mentioned that this color scheme, the red, white, blue, very much represent Hong Kong's 60s, 70s, and the can-do positive spirit of that particular era. Stanley, could I ask you, I mean, for youngsters, you talk about this differentiation before and after 1997. For youngsters, let's say someone in their 20s, do you think these 3 colors for them have any special meaning?
Back to here. I do think abstract, they know it just from a very subconscious abstract kind of understanding. Not until, I think I did more than 100 shows on Red, White, Blue. of course, they also spill over to the media, all those, then they will have a little bit more concrete what's behind that. At least otherwise, just like the Dragon's case, you don't know. I do think nowadays, people just attach to it, just can have like a bonding to this free color. Some may say it clearly what exactly is, some might not, I would say, yeah.
So what do you think is the future of red, white, blue? And you mentioned, I think you asked this question earlier on about who is promoting it. I mean, other than you as such a staunch advocate, of this color scheme. I mean, do you see there are others who are as enthusiastic as you? I mean, just now we talk about Leon signs. I mean, we need advocates like Kevin and Ken here, and who persistently and with their passion to continue this tradition. But in Hong Kong, who will be carrying the flag going forward? And do you see a future for this the color scheme?
Should I ask you in this way? Of course, I will bring this red, white, blue topic to schools, universities, secondary youngsters. I always bump to the Q&A. Maybe you have this question in mind, maybe. Stanley, I know red, white, blue is Hong Kong identity now. What's next? What is next symbol representing Hong Kong? There's always come to this question. I would say everything. Leon can, the bricks can. Unless you find the good story supporting the message you promoting it. I think that is the logic to me. Not visually or historically what is that, is how you package to bring the message meaningfully on top of it. So I try to answer you in such a way because the red, white, blue is red, white, blue now. I mean, even they do illustration with this three color, they subconsciously that is Hong Kong color. That's how they say. I'm more concerned with content. Content also versus the timing. Like I did this carpet because Hong Kong is extremely rough at the moment. So the title of this carpet called Hong Kong Walk On, 香港前行. Can we move on from the very rough to the smooth again? So I think time is one thing, context is another thing.
Thank you, Stanley. I would like to invite questions from the floor. I'm sure after hearing the presentations, I'm sure there are reactions, questions, or you may have the answer as to what is the next symbol for Hong Kong and what is the next color scheme for Hong Kong. Oh, the lady of here, could you please hand the mic to her? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I came to Hong Kong 30 years ago, and I remember that what was Hong Kong was being said by the tourism board, more or less, because the tourists were important. And I don't think people look at what was Hong Kong with a lot of pride, because Hong Kong was still being constructed in itself. But if you travel nowadays, the countries that attract you the most are countries like Japan or countries like Thailand that have a very strong identity. And where I'm extremely hopeful is that I think because we got to define ourselves as a Greater Bay Area and exist, people are now looking inward. And I think now people are paying attention because they suddenly realize we got to say what is our identity. Not against, not just because we are special. We are special because we are Hong Kong. Do you find that? Do you observe that there is an interest for people to now a sense of pride, or do you think, on the contrary, they have given hope and they are not interested? Do you see a transition that is actually going to be exciting?
I always think that our heritage is our identity, but let's hear from the speakers.
We do actually. So street sign started in 2017. So
till now is around 5 years. We sort of, like, within this 5 years, we see a gradual change from the response to our work. So at the beginning, signs are considered as either they love it or they say it's super dangerous, it's gonna hurt people. To now, people would really appreciate the values behind it, whether it's the craft, whether it's the history of the community that the shop plays a role in. Like, people really start to relate themselves to these values, and yeah, I think that's a trend that we see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the pandemic has unleashed a re-envisioning of our values. So it's been fascinating, intensive the last few years for all of us. But there's this sort of like inwardness that I think we need to embrace and add value. So another couple examples, we had this really amazing group who suddenly said, we're going to do Inter-Island Festival. So our foundation and some other partners came on board. They discovered this ferry between Pingchao, Chimawan, Chengchao that just connects. And we're like, why don't we become like the Venice Biennale perhaps in the future? But really looking at our village, the sea culture, the islands. And of course, if we're looking at the axis, you have northern China, you have we're really on the southern tip. And we have that power of, and culture that's very different climatically, architecturally. British, I grew up in a very kind of British environment back in Hong Kong. And had, opportunities to study in the US and even go to France as a young child. And just there's so many connections here. And I think to be able to accelerate and present our values, it's a responsibility, I think, definitely. So, and I'm discovering a lot more too. I mean, I really love Stanley during 2020 when we had this project. He took photographs of every mountain that he's traversed as photographs to document that reaction to the pandemic. And he's just produced this amazing oeuvre of the landscape of Hong Kong. And that is actually our cultural heritage, the cultural landscape, right? 70–80% of our urban fabric. That's valuable. That's something really powerful. So yeah, there's many things to talk about, and I want to put it back on Douglas actually, because he's driving heritage in Hong Kong, and maybe over to you to say what are you going to do for us?
I'll let the audience speak. Anyone else with a question? Oh, you need to follow up.
Example I want to give, because I think it's important. Speaking of colors, is what the Hong Kong tramways have done, with the green being now recognized as a Hong Kong green as part of Pantone. I mean, at the end of the day, the green of the tramway was chosen because there was too many stock of green after the war for the tank.
Yes.
So it's just by chance. But now look at, the initiative done, and now around the world you have a Hong Kong green that is mentioned. I really think we got to look at what we have with sea gold in front of our eyes and not see anything negative.
I think we have to, continue with this process of discovery. I'm sure, we have much more in our streets and in our city that we should treasure and we should promote. Not just for us to learn about them, but also to let the world see them as well. Anyone else in the audience with a question or any sharing with us tonight?
No.
Okay. If not, I ended the first session with this question to all the speakers. What would you like to see change to make Hong Kong better in your area?
Well, for us, maybe we have already talked about it, but policy change to encourage more sustainable signboards and environments. Yeah.
I need a lecture on this. It's exhausting working with many stakeholders through some of our public processes. But I really just hope there's more openness. People, whether you're seated on the table, to really hear the other side of the story and values. It's been really tough. I mean, each of these micro parks has taken maybe 150 meetings per tiny little community park, which represents the struggles of understanding and culture of sharing. So I just really hope we can still restore that and be able to sit, whether you're public, private, government, grassroots, and find ways to do that. So either through think tanks or community creativity, and be open-minded and not see design as engendering a position, but it's inspiring and can open up communities and culture. So that's more of a ask. Rather, I'll stay politely, diplomatically controlled with my, but I wanted to come back to you because you're right behind the liberté, égalité, and fraternité. So I was like, red, white, and blue, you were mentioning that. Those values.
Stanley?
Well, Hong Kong changed a lot, yes, for good and for bad. When we sit here, we talk about creativity, right? And definitely culture, creativity, art, all this is in a very good progress for the last 10 or 20 years in Hong Kong. Of course, I can do a lot, my personal kind of values are pushing those I believe. But having said that, on the other hand, my commercial partners, like my client, corporates, or institution, sometimes government is my client, then I try very hard still persuade particular commercial corporate that how we put up things to the public that really wholeheartedly along social good. Wholeheartedly, not to package it that is for the best for the society, but just really into it. I try very hard. I see possibility, yet it's not enough. That will change the city.
If I can, just add to that, like, I think when I mentioned the policy change for signboards, like, there's something more like behind this that is more the key reasons behind when I said that. Because when we talk about signboards, usually we always talk about actually the bottom-up energy of people who actually shape the shops and shape the streets by building their own things on the streets, while this kind of flexibility actually disappearing. It's not sometimes particularly on signboard, it might be related to the wet market as well, or for the regulation of like strengthen to kind of stop people from putting their plants on the streets, these kind of things. I think that is also a little bit related to what Stanley mentioned, is the potential for people to do these things. If that can be a bit more relaxed and open-minded, that would be actually the message, best change behind. Yeah.
Thank you very much for a thought-provoking evening, and please join me in giving a big round of applause to our distinguished speakers. You have been a wonderful audience, and I'd like to take this opportunity to once again thank the French Consulate General and staff, and also the Asia Society for hosting this wonderful forum tonight to allow us to discuss heritage, both as built heritage and also the heritage in the streets. I hope that we will have other opportunities to get together, because I'm sure there are so many other topics, fascinating topics, that we could spend hours and hours, talking and exchanging ideas. So I look forward to seeing all of you again, and thank you very much again for coming to the Night of Ideas. Good night.
Thank you so much, Douglas, and thank you, dear speakers, for the enlightening exchanges we've had tonight, and the same could be said for the first panel. Now we have come very well into the night, as you can see, but it's not totally the end of the Night of Ideas, because you can still stay on the Asia Society site to enjoy the